on the table like a flea market or a yard sale, let a bunch of strangers come by and walk away with it. But that's what happens every day in every county all across the country, and they're called probate laws. Actually, they're called laws of descent and distribution. It's a cold, hard set of laws that governs the distribution of your property, the appointment of guardian, the appointment of administrator. Everything is left to chance. Sometimes it goes almost exactly the way you want it to go, but quite often it goes totally contrary to what you want it to go, and it can be very time delaying and very costly to go through that. Now, what are these probate expenses that we talk about? The probate court is the legal system that is set up to oversee the distribution of your property. They look at that as standard operating procedure. In Texas, you're a community property state. That presents another problem. It may have some benefits, but from my side of the coin looking at it, presents a problem. Let me give you an illustration why. I was down at Terry Williams Church, Boulevard Baptist, in Burleson, Texas, good number of years ago. 2 weeks before I got there, one of his deacons, a fine godly man, was out in the pasture, and a bull stomped him to death. They'd never had any problem or whatever, but it happened. He did not have a will. He had a wife and two teenage sons. 2 weeks after he died, when I come to do the seminar, he and his wife had planned on meeting with me when I got there, but they didn't have time. And within the 2 weeks after he died, she had already had to begin to probate his half of the estate. Didn't make any difference how it was titled. It was community property. She had to go to court and petition the court to be appointed guardian of not only the person but the property of her own children. Within the 2 weeks after he died, she had already spent out $2,000 on legal fees, and it was going to take some time, and she had to go through this probate process. Now, what is the probate process? Again, it's the legal system that's set up to do it, and you have a bunch of people that are going to be involved in it, attorneys, administrator, court, and so on. But I described the process of when a person dies, getting it from where it is to where you want it to go is sort of like when you die, they put your property up on a conveyor belt, flip the switch. Now your property is going down this conveyor belt called probate, but the problem is attorneys get a fee, administrative fees, bonding, court costs. The normal procedure with no complications and so on. Now, if you have absolutely no debt, that can be expedited quicker. But if you have mortgage, car loans, credit card loans, then you go through the probate process, and it takes about 9 to 12 months, sometimes in Texas only about 6 months, 3 to 6 months, but it costs somewhere in the area of about 5 to 12% of the estate when you add all the fees and everything together. That's for about 5 hours work. The probate process, even though it takes a long time, is not a lot of work. It's just the process that you go through. I'm not going to tell the stories now, but tonight I'll tell you of a $3.5 million estate that ended up less than about $400,000 made it to 6 nieces and nephews. Another one, 16 rental properties that a mom and dad had. Their daughters were missionaries. A second marriage was involved. Everything ended up going to the second spouse. The day the dad died, she locked the kids out of the house and so on. It's a very nasty thing. I'll tell you about that night. I'll tell you about a small estate, only $89,000. Took 9 months to close the estate, cost $8,000. The sad part is that all that could have been avoided on all three of those things with a thing called revocable living trust. The living trust is a document that you draw up just like you do a will. When you have a will, You have it signed, witnessed, and notarized, and you put it, once it's done, then you put it in a safe deposit box, you put it in a safe place at home, and I call it a dormant document. It just lies there until you die. When you die, then it becomes the controlling factor. But with a living trust, the living trust becomes an entity just like a corporation, just like the church is a corporate structure as far as legal things go, not biblically, but legally, it's a corporate structure with the president, vice president, or pastor and trustees and so on like that. And I describe the living trust as sort of like making a mini corporation. When you build your trust, you have it signed, witnessed, notarized, just like you do a will. The only difference is the will you take home and put in a safe place. The trust becomes an ongoing daily affair. Not a lot of work involved in it, but it is an entity that has a daily thing in it. Now, the living trust, I describe the living trust, once you build it, it's sort of like a toy box. When you sign, witness, and notarize your living trust, you built the toy box. And then once you build the living trust, what you do is transfer all of your assets into the trust. In other words, you put all of your toys in the toy box. Now, the living trust is set up so that when you die, it doesn't go through probate. It's like life insurance. It's like IRA, 401k. It's like putting a beneficiary on it so that it passes directly to who you want it to go to. So let me use my wife and I as an example. We have a living trust like this. Our living trust called Joe and Connie Asbury Revocable Living Trust, dated March 26, 1993. That's the name of our little mini corporation or our toy box. While it's in there, my wife and I are co-trustees. Some people are under the misconception that when you have a trust drawn up, that you have to name a bank or somebody else as trustee, and that's not true. You name yourself to be the trustee. So you have the toy box, you're in charge of it. Now, my wife and I are in charge of our toy box. We're the trustee, we're the beneficiary, and we're also the owner. So that means that in our trust, we're totally in charge of it. Nobody else, not our kids, not our bank, nobody else has anything to do with it. It's ours. Everything that's in there belongs to both of us. We live in the house, drive the car, spend the money, wear the clothes, eat the food. Everything that's in the toy box is for our enjoyment. The day I die, my wife owns 100%. The day my wife dies, I own 100%. Here in Texas, that's a real advantage because when you have it set up like that to totally go to each other, you totally avoid any of the negatives of the community property. It'll automatically go to the survivor. And then upon the second death, my son and my daughter are named to be co-successor trustees. I have 2 children, both of them are adults, and we have named them to be co-successor trustee. So if my wife and I are killed in an accident today, the very second that we go out into eternity, my son and my daughter automatically move up. That means they can go to my bank and have their name put on my bank accounts. My bank already has a copy of the trust. They know who's next in line, and it's all automatic. They don't have to have any court approval. They don't have to have an attorney. They don't have to have the county assessor come out, inventory anything. They just automatically move up. My house, if my wife and I die tonight, tomorrow morning they can pick up the phone, call a realtor, and put our house on the market and get it ready to sell. Regardless of whether my debts and other things are paid or not, they can still go ahead and sell the house. The documents my wife and I signed March 26, 1993, pre-authorized them to do it. It's all automatic. They move up and do it. They don't have to have an attorney. They don't have to go to court. The expenses will be zero. Remember back here on the probate expenses, generally from about 5 to 12%. As a rule of thumb, I found